beyond the sea, somewhere waiting for me. My lover stands on golden sand and watches the ships that go sailing.
Buster Keaton said that the basis for his fourth feature film was a long-held idea to use real underwater filming in a comedy. He may have been inspired by his childhood idol, illusionist and escape artist Harry Houdini. As early as 1917, when Keaton first appeared on screen, the press announced Subsea Miracle, a joint project between Houdini and the Williamson brothers, pioneers of underwater cinematography who had recently invented the photosphere for filming at depths of up to 250 feet. The project was unique, because in such cases, major studios tried to avoid costly and dangerous location shoots, usually depicting the underwater world either in an aquarium or through it like Georges Méliès, or portrayed the depths on dry land like Douglas Fairbanks in The Thief of Baghdad. The project with the Williamsons never materialized, but Houdini revisited the idea in his films The Master Mystery and Terror Island. Keaton himself first attempted to make a film on a ship with underwater filming as early as the summer of 1922. Although the underwater scenes didn't make it to the screen then, the idea had been waiting for its time. A year later, Keaton's art director Fred Gaboury went to San Francisco to assist director Frank Lloyd with sailing ships for the pirate film The Seahawk. He informed Keaton that a suitable vessel might be found at the local ship graveyard. Keaton, who was in town for the premiere of Our Hospitality, planned to select a ship and start work as soon as possible. However, apparently nothing suitable was found. So he returned to Los Angeles and, instead of the Navigator, started work on Sherlock Jr., which became his third major film. Meanwhile, Gaboury stayed in San Francisco to work with Lloyd and soon informed Buster that he had found what they needed. The main character of the Navigator became a 370-foot cargo passenger ship, the Buford. It returned from a journey to Siberia shortly after Keaton left for Los Angeles, carrying 100 unfortunate gold miners who had been rescued from the schooner Fred J. Wood, which had wrecked off the coast of Alaska. The Buford was built in Ireland in 1890 under the name Mississippi, and 8 years later it was acquired by the U.S. Army, renamed after Civil War hero John Buford Jr., and converted into a military transport. Keaton liked to tell that a Russian princess fleeing the revolution was once saved on his ship, but the truth was quite the opposite. Around Christmas, 1919, 249 migrants were deported from the U.S. to Finland on the Buford, including a group of anarchists led by movement leaders, earning the ship the nickname Red Ark. In 1923, it was bought by the Alaskan-Siberian Navigation Company and rebuilt for comfortable tourist accommodations. In the winter of 1924, while Keaton was finishing Sherlock Jr., the Buford embarked on another 2-month journey through the southern seas. The start of the film's production was announced on March 26th, before the ship returned. On the day the Buford arrived in port, Keaton traveled to San Francisco, inspected the ship, and approved it. The Buford was rented for 10 weeks for $25,000, which included the cost of repainting the vessel and the crew's work for the entire period. After the ship came under the studio's control, Buster and his gagmen spent several days thoroughly studying it. With the help of the veteran sea dog, Captain John O'Brien, they reportedly wrote as many as 400 pages of jokes. The setup for the plot of The Navigator, like Our Hospitality, was created by Keaton's staff writer and gagman Gene Chavez. At the beginning of the story, the helpless young millionaire Rollo Treadway is rejected by his equally wealthy and spoiled neighbor, after which the pair of idlers accidentally find themselves alone on a drifting ocean liner. Buster added spies from warring small countries whose efforts caused the ship to drift in the open sea, and possibly inspired again by Houdini's Terror Island, threw the heroes into even more trouble in a form of an island of cannibals. Believing that the dangers threatening the heroes should be presented as seriously as possible, Keaton hired Donald Crisp as his co-director. Crisp was a well-known British actor who had worked with Griffith and directed a number of dramatic films. Later, Buster recalled that an acquaintance had advised him to take Crisp as his assistant. He never named this person, but one possible candidate was Buster's friend and mentor, Roscoe Arbuckle, who knew Crisp and even performed on stage with him. Buster's leading lady became Catherine Maguire, his beloved from Sherlock Jr., the only instance when Keaton used the same partner in 2 consecutive feature films. A gifted dancer and experienced actress who worked in both drama and Senate comedies, In the Navigator, Catherine was not only used as a prop, but performed with Buster as a real comedic duo, even receiving the same sailor uniform as he did. For this film, Catherine not only had to learn how to swim, but even master the handling of boats. After transforming into the Navigator, the Buford sailed to its first destination. On April 30th, it docked at Redondo Beach for the filming of the opening scene of the spy meeting. The ship then headed to Catalina Island, where Keaton and the crew anchored near the shore for more than a month, shooting the majority of the scenes aboard. A total of about 60 people were involved in the filming, not counting the 30 members of the Buford crew, and approximately 400 extras portraying a fictional tribe from a South Seas island. Behind the scenes, they also joined Buster and his crew in baseball games. The tribe leader was played by Noble Johnson, a childhood friend of Lon Chaney who appeared in many well-known films, including the role of the native chief 9 years later in King Kong. The filming was not without incidents. During the work on the fireworks scene, a fire broke out. It was successfully extinguished, but the main difficulties still awaited Buster and his crew. The underwater scenes were initially planned to be shot at Catalina as well, but it turned out that the water near the shore was too murky. Additionally, Buster's wife Natalie, who arrived on the Buford in late June with their sons, 2-year-old Joe and 5-month-old Bobby, reportedly strongly opposed Buster experimenting that way in the open ocean. Therefore, it was decided to move the filming to the Eliota Springs Pool in Riverside, where Harry Houdini had filmed underwater scenes for Terror Island 3 years earlier. The pool was supplied with water from a natural sulfur spring, and it was completely changed every day, remaining crystal clear. On June 25th, work began to deepen the pool to 6 feet to accommodate the scenery, and a few days later, Buster arrived in Riverside with the crew. The shooting lasted almost 2 weeks, until the wall built to support the pool couldn't hold the weight of the water and cracked. Work had to be halted, and the cost of repairing the pool was to be covered by the movie's budget. The pool incident finally soured Buster's relationship with Crisp, who thought real underwater shots were unnecessary. Their relationship had been rocky from the start, as Crisp showed little interest in directing the dramatic scenes for which he was hired. Instead, Buster said he became a poor gag man, bringing wild jokes every morning and wanting to do only scenes that featured the main star. Before seeking a new underwater location, Keaton told Crisp that the work was done, so Donald left the production. However, Buster was so unhappy with Crisp's work that he reshot at least some of the dramatic scenes himself.
One was the girl, after they had dragged her out onto the island, and we went to her close-up, she just surrounded by feet. Well, he shot it in such a way that it looked like all she was doing was smelling feet, which would have been perfectly natural if we were looking for laughs, but we're not looking for laughs there. That and another scene in the first part, he let the spies, he let them do a little overacting. I was always a little fussy about that.
It's unclear how much of Crisp's material made it into the final cut, but he is definitely present as part of one of the movie's best gags. After Riverside, Buster traveled to Truckee, Nevada, to Mick Bay on Lake Tahoe, close to the locations where he had previously worked on Our Hospitality and Frozen North. The water there was clear, but very cold, making it impossible for Buster to stay underwater for more than half an hour. Since Buster didn't contact the Williamson brothers, Fred Gaboury had to create his own alternative to their photosphere. It was a heavy wooden box with enough space for 2 cameramen and a ladder inside, allowing for filming at a depth of 20 feet. Ice was used to prevent the glass from fogging. Keaton wore a suit weighing about 200 pounds, with a helmet modified to fully expose his face, ensuring the audience knew it was really Buster underwater and not a double. He not only acted in the heavy suit at depth, but also directed the shoots from the lake bottom via telephone. Sometimes Buster would even replace lifting mechanisms himself to keep working without having to resurface.
And the cameraman says, I'm too close. I want to be back further. I moved that camera box underwater. The box must have weighed about 1,400 pounds or something like that. That's how much you can lift when you're down around 15 or 20 feet deep.
The diving suit itself posed quite a few dangers. One time, Catherine accidentally locked the helmet on Buster while he was smoking for a gag, and he nearly suffocated trying to free himself. On another occasion, unaware it was forbidden, Buster started descending underwater using a rope ladder instead of a fixed one. The weight of the suit flipped him on his back, leaving him helpless and unable to breathe properly, with his face pressed against the helmet glass. It was even reported that at least once surfacing too quickly caused him to suffer from decompression sickness, with cramps throughout his body, leaving him unable to straighten up for several hours. Keaton worked in Truckee for more than 2 weeks and arrived in San Francisco on August 2nd, where he spent a couple more days filming a gag about Rollo's very short trip to his beloved's mansion, likely the final scene shot for the film. Out of thousands of feet of underwater footage, only a few hundred made it into the final cut. Buster even lost his favorite gag, in which Rollo, wanting to help a little fish, stopped the ship repair work, placed a starfish on his chest, and became an underwater traffic cop. The gag required a special mechanism installed on 4 telegraph poles above the dive site to control 1,000 rubber fish. It cost the studio 3 days of shooting and about $10,000, an amount that would have been enough to create a one-reel short film. However, during the film previews, this gag didn't get any laughs, so Keaton had to cut it. Buster later realized that the joke didn't work because it was placed in the wrong context. For the sake of an absurd episode, his hero was distracted from saving his beloved and himself. But even without that gag, The Navigator achieved tremendous success. The film broke box office records both after its premiere in Los Angeles and in New York a week later. The New York Capitol Theater announced the film's box office on opening day as the highest in its history. In its first week, the film fell just $100 short of a record. The press praised the movie, calling it an avalanche of fun, a panacea for melancholy, and the best film Keaton ever made, worthy of a month-long run in theaters. The film appealed to everyone, from children to the powerful. For instance, then-President Calvin Coolidge not only watched it multiple times in his private theater on the yacht, but later even invited Buster to the White House, where he handed him a plate as a memento which Buster kept for the rest of his life. It's no surprise that The Navigator, along with The General, remained one of Buster's personal favorites. For many years, he believed it would be great to remake the film as a sound picture. Back in the late 1930s, after Buster's appearance in Hollywood Cavalcade and the new wave of interest, Paramount discussed a talkie version of The Navigator with him and even prepared a script. In 1948, there was a plan to adapt it with Danny Kaye in the lead role. And 8 years later, Keaton dreamed of making The Navigator with his favorite Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz. It was The Navigator that Keaton and Rohauer planned to re-release in Europe following The General in the early 1960s. Unfortunately, these plans were hindered by lawsuits from the successors of Buster Keaton Productions. In 1965, when the legal issues were resolved, a new plan for the European re-release of the film emerged. The sound for the movie was to be created by the famous French comedian Jacques Tati, a follower of silent visual comedy and an ardent admirer of Keaton. Alas, this plan also never came to fruition due to Buster's death, but The Navigator remains one of his most popular films, regularly released and screened at film festivals. In 2000, the American Film Institute included The Navigator in its list of the 100 best comedies in history. And in 2018, the Library of Congress selected it for preservation in the National Film Registry as culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant. However, when Keaton began work on his next feature film, no one was assured of the coming success of The Navigator. The substantial costs of its production likely worried Buster's producer Joe Skank, who wanted to find ways to optimize his protégé's expenses. What came out of that, we will tell you in our next video.